Well, gang, it's time to start talking about infrastructure mode. Infrastructure mode. We're talking about Wi-Fi now. We're coming back to the Wi-Fi game. And when we're talking about infrastructure mode, what we're saying is what I'd like to have in most situations is not an ad hoc network, not a Bluetooth network just connecting a device to another device, or I don't need a Piconet. I don't want a Zigbee network necessarily to connect devices to each other and to a master controller system. You know what I really want? I want all my laptops and all my tablets and all my cell phones that are near me that I trust to be able to go through an access point to get to the wired network to potentially reach servers or to reach the internet. That's my goal. Gang, I just want to have my wireless devices enjoy the same benefits that my wired devices already have. Is that so much to ask? The answer is no, of course not. But to do that, I need some sort of hook. I need some way that we can get ourselves from the wireless world to the wired world and get those pieces to play nicely with each other. And that's what an infrastructure mode network does. Now we're going to be talking about the 802.11 standard. So again, an IEEE standard for layer 2 connectivity. 802.11 is going to be the predominant discussion for everything that we cover in wireless fundamentals. So what we need is a connection between 802.11 and our traditional 802.3. Remember what that is? 802.3? That's just Ethernet. All right, nothing too special. So our switches, right, and our routed network there, and potentially beyond that into whatever our wide area network might host as well. But I got to get there somehow, and that's going to begin with wireless to wired from 802.11 to 802.3. Now, important thing to remember. First and foremost, it's going to govern everything else that we talk about when we're talking about wireless, is to remember that wireless is a half duplex environment. What does that mean? Well, if you think about what you had back in the day when I had a bunch of devices connected to each other via a hub. Remember the old hubs? When you connected devices in toward a hub, all the ports in the hub would allow traffic to come in one particular port and then go out every other port. And because of that, it was as if we actually had configured a network in an even more simple fashion. We could go back to the days of coax. It's like having a bus network. Okay, a bus network worked like this. There was one wire, and everything was simply connected into that wire. Everything on the wire could use the wire, but no one could use the wire if someone else was using the wire. That's the old coax-based Ethernet. That was a hubbed-based Ethernet. And gang, we have one air. Okay, one common frequency that an access point is going to run at. And at that frequency, any one device can be using that particular air, that network space at a time. And so because of that, we are either, we're going to use sending, transmitting, or receiving. Now, if you're familiar with using the phrase sending and receiving, for wireless fundamentals, we're going to focus more on transmitting or receiving. It means the same thing, transmit and receive versus send and receive. But again, it is kind of the language, the native language, the jargon of the wireless really narrows it down to transmit and receive. And again, it's its history. All right, it's just the way that it's the history of wireless technologies and what they're based on. Now, when we work with an infrastructure mode, you have an access point. And that access point is going to have a certain radius in which the devices will be able to recognize it. We'll talk later about how they recognize it and all the communication, but you got to be close enough to be able to detect this access point and communicate with it. And what will happen is the access point's range is what we call a basic service area. Okay, a BSA, so basic service area. Now, basic service area is just the radius where we can see it. What's going to be in that area is what's called a basic service set, or a BSS. And we can think of that as really being, what are the rules, right? We're going to have some rules for this network. What's the native language of this network? What flavor of 802.11 are we speaking? What type of security are we implementing? What's the ID for this network? Are there restrictions on this network or filters as to who can connect or who can't connect? The basic service set essentially is a set of rules for connection that apply to an access point. The access point's range where devices can participate in that is called the basic service area. There's also another term here that we see. You see that switch? It's called a DS. It's a distribution system. Essentially, an access point doesn't do you any good in terms of its core goal of providing interconnectivity between devices and the wired network unless the access point has a wire to the wired network. And so we're going to see that we could support that at various different speeds. It could be 100 megabits per second. It could be an 8 gigabit per second pipeline between my access point, I should say, and a physical switch, typically a layer 2 switch, so it could go up to layer 3 switch if we wanted to. So the distribution system is what gets me back and forth between the wired and the wireless network. It's that switch to access point hookup or connection.